Okay, so I wouldn't say this house is haunted. I would say after gathering all the knowledge and information, I think it's just this land is haunted. But my first experience was when I shifted in since 2016. So I've been staying here for 8 years at least. There was one night when I was asleep. I felt a huge, very drastic compression at the edge of my bed. So I was lying facing the ceiling, and suddenly my feet just got pushed down like that.
I really don't feel good right now. I'm getting a vibe.
Is anyone here? What did you find?
You are listening to Supernatural Confessions.
Because the compression was so huge, obviously with that kind of impact, right, I woke up and I couldn't move. So it's like those horror films that you see when people try to shout, they cannot, there was no voice coming out from their throat. And I was just feeling very helpless. So very instantly when I felt that thing, my feet topple, I felt there were movements beside me. It was like as if it's calling, but I couldn't see anything because I was already awake, my eyes were open, I couldn't see anything. And the next thing I heard, so it happened in that split second when I realized the next thing was beside my ears, and then I heard a very subtle bell sound. It was not the jiggly kind of bell sound, it's just very subtle bell sound. The paralysis suddenly just went off and I could slowly move. After all that thing happened, right, I just felt so helpless. I waited for daylight to come, and then I just went out of the house, and I didn't come back home. I stayed throughout, I think one day. I stayed one day at my friend's place. And then my friend talked to me. She asked me to get the flower water to sprinkle around the house. Like it serves as like a holy water. And then she was telling me like, hey, you cannot run from this forever, you still have to go back home. So I went back home and I prepared. I even remember I got this thing, like, those kind of like, it's like a teapot or something, and then you buy the incense and then you have to burn it around the house. I did everything that was necessary. I was so desperate, I went to see a master. I told him, I felt the compression, then I felt this thing calling. Then the next thing he asked me, is it you heard a bell sound? Then I was so fascinated. I was so amused because it could be like the sound of wind, it could be the sound of a cat, a bird, or whatever, something drop, or like when you just start the car engine or what. How do you know it's a bell? How? But he didn't tell me how he know. He just tell me, if you hear bell sounds, it means that they want to come and disturb you. So after that, 4 years at least, even weirder things started to happen. When my parents were staying with me, back then we have clocks. Like any typical households, we have clocks hang on the walls and everything. Initially I was using 3M tapes. So I attached the hook onto the wall and then I hang the clock. It's funny when all the clocks would just drop out of nowhere, there's no wind or nothing, they would just drop and then it would shatter into pieces. And at that point of time, we didn't think much into it. We just thought maybe my father was telling me the 3M tapes are not working, maybe get a stronger one. So I went to get a stronger adhesive tape, and then the whole cycle just keeps repeating until my dad said, okay, we nail. So he nailed the clocks and still the same thing happened. So after that, there was one day when I came back home, and then he told me he was watching TV, and then he said, hey, funny I was here watching TV, and then suddenly the living room, because he was sitting at the area where you can access the living room clock and the kitchen clock, which are both visible. He said both fell at the same time. After that, he went to his office. He brought back a bigger clock, but there was like 3 5 cents that form a pyramid on the clock. He asked me to use the clock. Then I was like, why must use this clock? He said, just use, don't ask so much. So after that, my father also started experiencing funny things.
He was talking to somebody at home.
Yeah.
He spoke to your mom. Then she left.
Correct.
But she did not even come back at all.
Correct.
Did he tell you what he spoke to her about?
No. Until now, he never said. So after that incident, right, I believe he also had his fair share because he wouldn't buy a radio. He don't listen to radio. He bought a radio for nothing. So after fast forward a few years later, they decided to move back to their place. Then I asked him Then he said he buy a radio to make him feel better. Just so you know, he can convince himself that the radio is actually talking, not someone else. So I think that's why I don't know what conversation he had with the person before me,
Yeah.
but he thought it was my mom.
Did he see your mom at home, or he spoke to someone at home?
He spoke to someone else. He didn't see my mom because he was showering.
Also, he was showering in the toilet, and he's like speaking to someone outside the toilet, and the person replied.
Yeah. So when he came out, right, he looked very confused. He looked very perplexed. He like, because my brother is a Christian, so my brother didn't believe all these things. I'm sleeping in the master bedroom. So when you walk down the hallway, right, it's my parents' room first, then my brother's room, then lastly is my room. So my brother was still saying, hey, Zé, come on lah. He still joked about it. He said, if you know the thing want to come to your room, he will have to go through my room first, ma. So if he go through my room, I will tell him, that one is irrelevant department. You come to customer service, you know. They come and find me first.
Okay, so still quite blasé about it lah.
Yeah, he was making some humor about it. Then, so he said, okay lah, Jay, I tell you what. Okay, come, let's go into your room. I pray for you. So we sat down. And then he asked me to put my hand above his hand. And then he was like, dear Jesus, even though Jay don't believe you, but I hope you can bless her room, blah, blah, blah. Then he was like, that he suddenly acted like a feng shui master, telling me, I think your room too dark lah. You must let some light inside. You don't always pull down the blinds and everything. So I'm like, okay. Then after that, while we were doing the ritual halfway, we heard our dog bark. My dog, usually he's very barky lah. He likes to bark. But that bark was very different. He was standing at the door. He barked, bark, 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 bark. So we stood down there. We came out and then we see, because it was in the middle of the night already. So we stood down there and then we look at our dog. And then suddenly his tail went from upright and it just immediately fall. And he started hunching and he ran towards my brother's room. And then that's when my brother got freaked out. Even though he was a Christian, let me remind you that he just ran inside his room. Okay, good night, Jay. Bam! He closed the door on me. And then he went under his blanket. So next day, right, he passed me a Bible. So he said, Jay, you just take this Bible, put on your table. So I said, okay. And then after that, we both went out. Then when he came back, he got a bit pissed because he saw the Bible flung out. It was on the floor. My dog won't go and touch the Bible. My dog, usually, if it's things that's not edible, right, he won't go and touch it. So we have books on the table, nothing like that happened. So the Bible got flung out, and then my brother was very pissed. He said, why would you do that? Like, this is a Bible. And I'm like, hey, we went out at the same time, you know, like, obviously I didn't touch it, and the windows are closed as usual. So I think that's when my brother started believing in this, no?
Okay, so he was both in the room. You passed your Bible. You put it on the table.
Yeah, I put it on the table.
And then you both went out together.
Yeah,
You both come back,
yeah.
and the Bible's on the floor.
The Bible's on the floor.
So this is your room. Where was the Bible placed and how far was it flung?
So my brother placed it here. We placed it here, and then the Bible was there.
That's quite a distance.
The dog doesn't bite the books, but maybe he crawls, he knock, right?
Yeah, even if my dog were to do that, he would use his paws and it would just drop quite immediately just below the table, but it's not, it was flung out. That's why because my brother is also very skeptical. He would have, if it's just below where he placed it, right, he would have thought that it was the dog,
Yeah.
but he didn't. And then the TV incident. Then that was why I decided to reach out to you. I was doing housework, I was mopping the floor. Then I walked past the computer room. That TV, just a little background on the TV. So the TV is not a smart TV, okay? It's a TV that my father used to purchase. So ever since he moved out, I got my own smart TV. So I carried that TV into the computer room just for vision purposes. We don't really use it. Like apparently it looks good there. And because it's not a smart TV, you cannot Netflix or anything. So nobody touched the TV. We usually watch TV in the living room. So when I was mopping the floor, then I saw this blue screen. I didn't think about it as a paranormal activity. So I immediately told my son and my husband to just switch it off lah. So they were in the room for 10 to 15 minutes and they couldn't find the remote. Then I went in and I told my husband off lah. I said, hey, I think you know you can actually manually go and press the button and just off the TV like that. Then he said, I cannot. So I went to go and try the buttons all by myself, and apparently I think there are like 6 or 7 buttons. So I started from the most left, whatever buttons that work lah. So I thought I was getting closer already because it's volume up, volume down, left, right, up, down, power button. Then I keep hitting the power button. It just, the TV just wouldn't off. So we were very clueless already, and then tada, he finally found the remote, and the remote was above all of us. So meaning to say, all of us didn't know where the remote came from, where the remote was, and the power button was 40. So nobody could have just switched on the TV like that.
So that also means that it's not possible that someone rolled over the bed and then pressed the...
Yeah, initially I was still, when they were still looking for a remote, right, I was still telling my husband, I said, hey, could it be you or not? You go and put things on the table, you know, there's a cabinet there, so usually he put things on the table, on the cabinet. Then I thought like maybe the thing presses onto the remote, but apparently the remote was above all of us. So there was no way that it was by accident. So okay, after that, right, I went back to look at the CCTV and I saw how the TV on by itself. Okay, we figured out where the remote was. We used the remote to off the TV and then we went out for movies. So when we came back, it was already 1 a.m. So he was downstairs walking the dog. And it was just me and my son at home. My son's room was just beside the computer's room. So I was standing in between. So when I stood in between, right, and then I saw the TV on again. I was standing in between the rooms. So I told my son, I said, hey, the TV on eh. He was using his pillows to cover his eyes and then he did that. Then he just went back to cover his eyes. And then I walked into his room. I sat beside him. I said, hey, the TV on. He looked at me. I don't want to be involved.
I don't want to be involved.
Yeah, he don't want to be involved. So after that, I tell him, hey, please, go inside the room with me. Go and off the TV with me. Then after that, he got out of his bed. He walked. He was still inside his room. So I thought he was going into the next room with me. But he just closed his door on me. And then he said, good night, mommy. And then I went back to the room. The TV off by itself again. So after that, right, I'm like, okay, I'm convinced already. This is paranormal again. So I went to check the CCTV. So during that whole time when we were watching Planet of the Apes at the cinema, at the theater, right, that 3 hours, the TV was not on. It didn't on and off. So it only was on and off when we were around. So maybe he's trying to tell me that. So can you imagine that after that, right, everything started to ring a bell. Then when he came back, right, then I'm like, you know what? Could it be that when I was standing in the middle of the room and then the TV on and off, right? That means he was there the whole time. Then he said, obviously lah, if not he next block meh. And I'm like, yeah. So after I moved in, a few years, I think 2 years later, my neighbor came up. Then she said, can you stop moving things at night? It bothers me, you know. She said, even though I've not seen you before, but ever since you moved in, right, I hated you already. And I always go to work and I tell my colleagues that I don't like you. Then I'm like, I never seen you before. So after that, she even got her 2 daughters to come up to validate. So the daughters told me, she said every night, right, they can hear me dragging my furniture all the way from the master bedroom all the way to the living room. And then they can hear it. She said every night. She was like interrogating me. She asked me, what time do you sleep? I said, usually 11 to 2 a.m. that time phase. She said that's the time when all these things happen. So I hope, you know, I'm like guilty as charged, but I feel like I'm being accused. So I actually invited them. I said, you come into my house. Can you tell me, like, what can I possibly, because my bed is built in, it's a platform. I cannot be possibly shifting things every night. I said, what could possibly that I can shift? Then she said, I don't know, but the sound is like it's so bad that we just didn't like you, and we are thinking why do you have to do this every night? So obviously the sound is not very subtle. It's those kind of loud shifting sound.
Come out
Is there anyone here?
and it goes back.
What did you find?
See? It goes back here. Go back.
You are listening to Supernatural Confessions.